Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing Wicked Part 1, the highly anticipated movie musical adaptation of Wicked, the Broadway musical, which itself is loosely based on the 1995 novel written by Gregory Maguire. And it's in fact a series, but that is the first of the series. And that, of course, is loosely based on The Wizard of Oz, the classic 1939 film, which that is based on the 1900 novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum. So it's crazy to think how far back the story goes with these characters. And I think it's fair to say, honestly, that The Wizard of Oz is possibly the most parodied work of fiction. It's up there, obviously, with A Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life, but those are Christmas stories, But then, of course, the characters, like, Dorothy, the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, those two are like some of the most popular Halloween costumes of all time. And obviously that film is iconic. I haven't talked about The Wizard of Oz yet, but I feel like it's so ingrained in pop culture that it's like, if you don't know Wizard of Oz, then like, how can you not? You know what I mean? Can you imagine if someone's like, oh, I never heard of this before? That's impossible. That's literally impossible as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, like, just for example, the ruby red slippers. That is an iconic piece of memorabilia. And as a matter of fact, that's in the movie. In the book, they are silver slippers. That's a fun fact for you, which we do see in this movie with Nessa Rose, that those silver shoes that are gifted to her by her father. And it's interesting because with this movie, I personally, like, when I first saw the initial trailer, like that first teaser trailer, which I believe debuted during the Super Bowl, my initial reaction was honestly indifference. And the first trailer was like, the little teaser trailer was Glinda being like, oh, you're green. And then Elphaba replying, I am. That's the first little tease of this movie. And I was like, oh, right, this is coming out. Like, okay. And then when I actually started getting excited was seeing the interviews, all the press tour interviews with Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba and Ariana Grande-Butera. That's how she's officially credited, as Glinda. And then, of course, all the viral stuff, in particular, the whole thing about holding space for defying gravity. And then it's so funny because now there's a subsequent interview of Ariana admitting, like, she's like, in the moment, I was thinking to myself, am I okay? Like, she just didn't know what was going on. And she was just trying to support Cynthia emotionally, who was having her own emotional reaction. And then the interviewer, like, how that meant something to her. So it's just funny how that became a whole thing. That, and then also what I've been seeing so much is people recreating the choreography from What Is This Feeling, a particular part with the books. And of course, also the fact that Ariana manifested this role, how she had said years ago she always wanted to play Glinda, and so that, and the fact that like Ariana and Cynthia now have this beautiful friendship as a result of doing this project together, or these two movies really, because they filmed them back to back, and Part 2 is officially now titled Wicked for Good. I'm glad it's been split into two movies because even the musical itself, which I saw years ago with my friend, and then it worked out that I was able to see the movie with her too, so that just is great. But Act 2 is much different tonally compared to Act 1, and so it's like good giving it two separate movies for that. And it lived up to the hype for me. Like, I was really excited, and I was like, now I can't wait to see it because I love the music too, in and of itself. Like, I love the songs, and it is composed by Stephen Schwartz. He did the lyrics and the music for Wicked. And in the second movie, apparently there's going to be 2 new songs, so I'm really excited for that. I'm sure they're going to be wonderful. I just really can't wait. But I'm most excited, honestly, for Good, the finale song, because that is like the emotional climax with these two. So, oh my gosh, it's going to be beautiful. I already know. But so like with the musical, though, I personally don't remember tearing up. I'm like trying to remember, and if I did tear up or got emotional at all, it was toward the end of the musical. But with this movie, I started tearing up the second the score started with, the opening musical overture like that, I started tearing up. I was like, oh boy, all right, let the tears flow, because much like Ariana and Cynthia, how that was kind of criticized too, people teasing them for like, oh, why do they keep getting so emotional, crying so much? And my opinion, person, it's like let it out. Like, don't feel bad for getting emotional. Like, I get it, especially because like this role means so, like these roles mean so much to them. And I thought it's really endearing too, seeing like, this has been released as well, like when they announced, or like when Jon M, the director of this movie, told them they got the role, and you see Cynthia tearing up, you see Ariana tearing up saying, thank you so much, I love her so much, I'm going to take such good care of her. I'm like, oh gosh. So I think that's all beautiful and lovely, and they really gave their full selves to these roles. Like, another big thing in the marketing was them talking about singing live during the actual production. So I think that's really cool too, just having like that connection with the songs, like as they're singing, because that's an homage, as they said, to like, people, the actors singing it 8 times a week, with the actual Broadway musical. And the Broadway musical came out back in 2003, and obviously the original people in the roles were Idina Menzel as Elphaba and Kristen Chenoweth as Glinda, Glinda/Glinda. That's iconic too, because they're such incredible singers. So then it's lovely that they got to cameo in this movie. I thought that was such a nice touch. And I already knew about that going into it, but I was like, oh, it still, was a nice surprise, even though like I already knew about it though. It just was like, a good homage. Very cute how they did that. But yeah, I mean, this story, it's really moving and powerful, and all the emotional nuances I think are all the more impactful in the movie, because like you have the up close moments, and obviously it's different on stage when it's like, playing to an audience, and you got to play to the back of the house, as they say, like it's, so with this, it's like there's like more moments for subtlety and like really seeing kind of the heartbreak really with Glinda in particular, because yes, it's a comedic role too, but there's much more nuance to Glinda as well. Like there's like this kind of tragic loneliness with her that is much more subdued compared to Elphaba, obviously, since this really is more so Elphaba's story. So yeah, going into it, I was like really hyped, and I'm happy it's seeing so much success, and that the audience is like, everyone loves it who's seen it, especially obviously theater kids, everyone who like already has love for Wicked, and then people who had never seen it before, because that's great too, and just getting to like enjoy all of these songs and these characters, and then people then, going back and getting the book, like, that's all great too. I haven't read the novel, I'm sure it's great. From what I understand, it's much darker and I think more political undertones. I'm sure it's really great and well written and stuff, but maybe I'll check that out, who knows. But mostly though, what I loved in terms of the press for this movie, like before talking about the movie itself, before I get into that, is I just loved hearing about Jon M, the director, talking about the whole filmmaking process and just like his passion for it. And because like he just seems like such a genuinely kind and intelligent and warm, lovely person to work with. I'd love to work with him someday, honestly, like just putting that out there, because you never know. He actually wrote a memoir called Viewfinder. I think I'm going to check it out, because I'm sure it's just really interesting hearing about his background and growing up and getting into filmmaking and everything. So I'm sure that's really great. But just hearing like details, for example, like with the tulips, how that's all real tulips, 9 million tulips. That's amazing. Or again, the fact that they decided to sing live, or like, the costuming and like the production design. Hearing also about, there's a great video breaking down the choreography and everything that went into the song Dancing Through Life. And that is with Jon M and the cinematographer Alice Brooks. And they're talking about like setting up the shots and like the complicated nature of it, but then how like all these moving parts, how it all came together. Really cool, really interesting. I highly recommend checking that out too, if you haven't, on YouTube. But like all these great tidbits about making the movie and just all the passion that went into it. And it all comes through on screen. And so like each of the songs, because obviously, so the movie opens up with No One Mourns the Wicked, and then like the backstory of Elphaba. and it's funny because there's so much, like, knowing part two, like knowing about act two, there are great foreshadowing moments in this that I noticed, like even just the subtleties in the music, like even in that opening number, there's like a brief but like noticeable moment of like a little musical motif from For Good. So like it's going to be interesting then when when part two is released, Wicked For Good, and then like going back and watching part one and part two back to back as a double feature, and just seeing all of the little foreshadowing moments. So I think that's really cool details too. But with Glinda, she's a great character. Like obviously Ariana Grande-Butera, as she's officially credited in this movie, she like really plays those moments well. Like even in the opening number when like she has to like put on a brave face basically, but then like she's having these moments where she's clearly, in her feelings and clearly upset, but having to hold that back because everyone's so cheerful and excited. Like all the munchkins of Munchkinland are all so happy that this wicked witch is dead. And then, of course, someone asks her, is it true you were her friend? And then they go back. She's like telling them the story. And so, of course, they meet at school at Shiz University. And then, obviously, with Elphaba and Nessa Rose, her sister, that's an interesting role too, because so she's played by Melissa Bode, and she has said this in interview, Marissa Bode, pardon me. She had said in interviews that she is the very first authentically disabled Nessa Rose. So even that representation as well is really wonderful. It's going to be interesting how they do it differently in Act 2. Like, we'll see. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. But, I mean, with her whole thing, Nessa Rose, is like she's saying like, no, I don't need help. I can do this on my own. It's like the start of her new life, and like how she's kind of in her sister's shadow because everyone is basically terrified or repulsed by her. She went through that her whole life, and she even has the whole spiel of, okay, no, I am not seasick. No, I didn't eat grass as a child. And yes, I've always been green. Like she has that all ready to go. And like she's just sadly used to it. Like even her own father rejects her, and like she's raised by the bear nanny, Dulce Bear. But Elphaba, though, obviously, despite all that, she's just so genuinely intelligent and kind and wanting to do good. And with that said, what stood out to me, too, was the moments, like the use of the words good and bad. Like the first thing, besides like the singing with Glinda at that point in the story, but the first thing she says in the movie is, it's good to see me, isn't it? So stuff like that stood out to me. And then like when she's trying to be friendly toward Elphaba, she's like, oh, well, I plan on majoring in sorcery, so perhaps I can help you with your problem. And then Elphaba says, oh, problem, like, oh, I get it. And then she has her whole speech of trying to help someone you don't know with skills you don't have. I'm sure everyone here is really impressed. Oh, I could care less what others think. You mean you couldn't care? Like, she's very intelligent and just like kind of putting people in their place. And then Glinda being like, is that bad? Like, I was just trying to be nice. And then like her little groupies, like, those two played by, well, one of them is played by, of course, Bowen Yang. I don't even know, whatever. But it's funny because that's the thing with Glinda. It's like even she really doesn't have any true friends. Elphaba becomes her true friend and vice versa. That's why that relationship is all the more impactful, because like really Elphaba is like obviously an outcast, but then of course Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh, she like sees the greatness in her because like seeing that she can, like she has all this power, like even though it's like she needs to learn how to harness it, like with her anger, and like she's had it from when she was a child. Really, like when she's first born as a little baby, when she cries and everything just shoots up to the ceiling, And I had kind of forgot that with the Broadway show because again, I saw it years ago, and like I forgot certain things, but I did remember certain key plot points, but obviously like the songs and everything. But yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's a key thing about her character, that she has this power, and obviously she wants to meet the wizard. And so her big I Want song with the wizard and her heart's desire at this point is not have her green skin anymore. And then of course, like, with her and Glinda, sorry, at this point still in the story, just butting heads immediately. And then, of course, we have that iconic song, one of my favorites, What Is This Feeling? And again, the choreography, like with the books, people recreating all of that. There were so many videos of that. It's so great. I love that whole song. It's cool how it's a montage in this movie. Like, the two of them just like forced to live together. And then like, it's so funny before when Glinda says, something terrible has happened. I didn't get my way. Like, oh my gosh, And it's so interesting because obviously, Ariana makes the role her own, but there are certain moments where, to me, it feels like she's directly channeling Kristen Chenoweth as the original Glinda, so I think that's really cute, too. Just certain moments, like with Popular, for example, or the part when she's like, we were just talking about you, how you should join us tonight. It's like certain things with that. It's really sharp, don't you think? Black is this year's pink. Oh, and to that point, I painted my nails pink, and then I wore a green shirt. My friend, coincidentally, too, she had her pink nails and her green shirt as well. She's like, oh, look, we match. I was like, oh, gosh, I love this. But then, obviously, like, the whole big subplot is with the animals and then Dr. Dillamond. And obviously, like, Elphaba at this point is just like, well, if I can meet the wizard, like, the wizard can help us, and then obviously, like, all this foreboding stuff. And then, of course, when Fiyero shows up, played by Jonathan Bailey. And it's so funny because also, like, in all of these interviews, people were saying, like, oh, Jonathan Bailey, he has, like, chemistry with everyone. And, honestly, I truly see that, like, in this movie. Like, Fiyero, when he shows up, he's just this handsome and charming fellow, and he has chemistry with everyone. Like, anytime he's interacting with someone, like him in the library, and I was like, okay, I could ship that. Him and Bowen Yang's character, yep, I could ship that. Him and Glinda and Elphaba, I could ship this throuple. I could ship that, I'm here for everything, for all this. It's too funny, oh my gosh. But it's great, too, because when he first meets Elphaba, that's the first moment where he's like, oh, someone who wasn't, like, basically charmed by him, like someone who kind of just sees right through his being so carefree and brainless. And, that's great foreshadowing, too. And obviously his whole song, I love that whole sequence. All the dancing, all the stuff with the books, like the choreography, the whole thing with, like, that moving clock thing, and, like, with the books, like, the library. And again, hearing them break that down, I thought was so fascinating, and like creating that shot in the movie, like that particular frame of like the person jumping down and spinning, like it's just so really cool. I'm like, oh my gosh, obviously like put all the work into it and it came out really amazing. Then of course, like when Glinda invites Elphaba, and again, they're being such like her two quote unquote friends, her groupies really, they're such catty bitches. Like, I can't with them. They're like, oh, bye, Elphaba, I love your shoulder pads. And like, oh, we gotta go rouge our knees. And like, they see the hat, and then he's like, oh, what is this? And like, it's like, oh, I couldn't give it away to, like, I don't hate anyone that much. It's like, oh, no, I couldn't. And of course, she gives the hat to Elphaba. And it's like, she's being cruel. But that's the first point when Elphaba is trying to be nice to Glinda, because Glinda had gotten that munchkin boy Bach to ask out Nessa Rose, but she only did it to like get him off of her back so she could go out with Fiyero. And he's like, oh, you're good. I don't know what you mean. I love helping others. Again, like the use of the words good and bad throughout this movie. It's so interesting to me because that's the whole big theme. Obviously, no one's all good or all bad. There is, no one's all green or all pink, if you will, if you want to put it like in that way too. It's too funny, like just with that like imagery. But the whole scene with the Ozdust Ballroom, it's so beautiful and heartbreaking. And when like she walks in, Elphaba wearing the hat, and then like everyone of course making fun of her, and then like that's when you see like the true disappointment on her face when she's looking at Glinda. But then instead of like shying away, she just surrenders to like her isolation of like, well, I truly am alone, but then I'm just gonna dance and just power through this. And then Fiyero says, I'll say this much, she doesn't give a twig what anyone else thinks. And Glinda says, of course she does, she just pretends not to. And that's when she finally has that moment of empathy. And then obviously this whole part, like, so in the musical, it's not like, I don't remember tearing up during it. It's just like, it's a great profound moment because it's so silent on stage. I remember that, and just everyone watching her and she's just doing her dance. But in this, it's so profound and heartbreaking and beautiful, and it really made me weep. Like, oh my gosh. The fact that like she finally sees the humanity in Elphaba, and then like even her like when they say like, what are you doing? Don't, like, her friends, and then she's like, no. And then she starts dancing with her, and then Elphaba finally isn't alone. And there's a beautiful, like, truly human moment where she just whispers, it's all right. And like she's tearing up, and then like they hug. That hug is the start of a true friendship. It's an apology. It's an I'm here for you. It's so beautiful. And she finally like felt bad because of Elphaba like got her into the sorcery class that she wanted to do, and she only did that because of like, helping Nessa Rose. But again, that was like only for a selfish reason. So it's interesting too, like that domino effect. But then Madame Morrible, she's like, well, she insisted I, like have you join the class. But from my opinion, I don't think you have what it takes. I hope you prove me wrong. I doubt you will. Like she gives her the training wand. So like then that beautiful, profound moment of them dancing and then everyone joining in, and it's so lovely. So then like when they're finally friends, Elfie, now that we're friends, like, oh, can I call you Elfie? I don't know. It's a little perky. And then like, of course, it's like, let's tell each other something we never told anyone. And then, okay, I'll go first. Fiyero and I are getting married. And then it's like, oh, he asked you? Oh, he doesn't know yet, And then it's like, okay, now tell me one of yours. And then she's like, about the bottle. And it's like, well, that's not fair. I told you a really good one. Like she's all pouty, like, it's too funny. And then she tells her, my father hates me. That's not the secret. The secret is he has a good reason. And saying like with Nessa Rose, like with the milk flowers, that's why she's in that chair. And then the mother sadly didn't make it after childbirth. She's like, it's all my fault. And then Glinda tells her, it's the milk flower's fault, not yours. And that's really beautiful too. Just kind of that moment of having someone else really be there for her, and like, seeing past like what everyone else always thought of, seeing her just like as this monster, and like, oh, this person is like someone to be scared of rather than just like a person who deserves love and kindness just as much as anyone else, So that's all really lovely. And then of course getting the song popular, you're gonna be popular. So in the Broadway musical, it's so like over the top and so hilarious. It's so great. This too, like all the funny moments they do with it. And my gosh, what I distinctly remember with the Broadway musical was the actors who played Glinda being like, you're welcome. Like, so like over the top with that part. And it was so hilarious to me. My gosh. But I love all that. And then like with Elphaba saying popular, right, it's all about popular. That song is so much fun. Oh my gosh. And what's so lovely is, I didn't actually necessarily make this connection initially, but when she puts the flower in Elphaba's hair, that's the same flower that Fiyero had first given to Glinda. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, like that's who it's truly meant to be for, like, because Fiyero and Elphaba, the start of their love story. That's really beautiful. And then her saying, pink goes good with green, goes well with green. It so does. I love all that. And then like the whole part with the, the lion cub, oh gosh. And poor Dr. Dillamond's getting taken away, like, getting rid of the animals, not allowed to speak anymore, not teach. It's like taking away their rights. And like the poppies. And then of course, like anytime when Elphaba truly like gets really angry, then like that's when her, like, through those emotions, that's like when her power truly comes through. And so then like when everyone passes out from those flowers, except for Fiyero because he's brainless. So, it's interesting. And then like they take the cub together to save the cub. And that's when they have another like really emotional moment. When he's like, don't you ever let anyone else talk? And then she's like, so you think I want to be this way? Like just kind of getting fed up and hard on herself and everything. And this moment of tenderness, like when she's like touching his face, it's really beautiful too, because she also sees through Fiyero. It's like, well, you claim like to be carefree and everything, but deep down, like, then why are you so unhappy? Like she like sees through him. So it's another like profound connection with them. And then leading to that beautiful song, I'm Not That Girl. Gosh, she sang it so beautifully. I was like, oh my God, that too made me tear up, honestly. Oh gosh. I love the lyric. Wishing only wounds the heart. It's just really so sad. Because it's like her thinking to herself that he'll never be with someone like me, and like he's with Glinda, and like them being so, like his line too, it's so funny to me. He's like, I'll have you know, I'm genuinely self-absorbed and deeply shallow. I love that. It's so funny. Oh my gosh. But then, like, with Elphaba, when her dream is going to come true, she'll get to meet the wizard, and she gets summoned to, like, you know, personal invitation to meet the wizard, because, like, training with Madame Morrible this whole time, and, like, her seeing greatness in her. But then, as we know, you know, she has her own hidden agenda. And so then, like, when they're going to go to the Emerald City, and then she's like, come with me. And they say, I couldn't possibly, this is your moment, I'm coming. Like, you know, too funny. But it's so funny, too, before, like, when they're talking, and then she's like, oh, it's Fiyero. He's been distant and he's been thinking, which really worries me. Like, I love that. It's so funny. And he's like, I've been thinking. And then Elphaba's like, I've heard. I just love all that. Like, this love triangle that's going on. Like, it's so funny. And then, like, the other love triangle with, like, Bach yearning after Glinda, and then Nessa Rose, though, with Bach. Like, all this stuff. It's, like, interesting. But it's cute when then they're gonna go to the Emerald City together. And it's so sweet what she wrote, like, with the book that she gave her, saying, I hope you get your heart's desire. And then, you know, she comes with her to Emerald City, and we get one short day in the Emerald City. I love that, too. And that's when, of course, there's the cameo with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth. And it's so cute, just the part when Idina Menzel, like, fixes Elfie's hat, and, like, you know, then Glinda's about to sing, but then Kristen Chenoweth just puts her hand over her mouth, like, nope, like, this is my time to shine. Too funny. And Idina Menzel does the same riff, like, that she does in the original with, you know, Defying Gravity. I love all that. It was like a perfect cameo with the two of them. It's lovely. It's so much fun. And then, of course, meeting the wizard himself, played by Jeff Goldblum, who's so great in this role because, like, he's got that delightfully eccentric magician guy. He seems so warm and stuff, but obviously that's not the case. That's what this, like, show, this movie does so well, as in, like, the original Broadway show, and with this movie, is that, like, when we find that he is the true villain, because then, of course, like, you know, Elphaba's the one who can read the Grimoire. Like, she realizes, you have no real power, and, like, then she realizes Madame Morrible, too, is working with him, and, like, you know, it's okay, dearie. Like, you know, they were just using her this whole time, and that's so devastating, that realization. But that just goes to show that, like, showing true evilness, that's what's so horrifying and yet so truthful, in that they didn't seem evil at first. Like, you know, Madame Marvel seemed like, oh, she's going to help her harness her power and work with her and seeing greatness in her. But then it's like just using it against her. And then same with the wizard. It's like, oh, he seems so kind, if not eccentric, and like someone that can truly help. But it turns out, nope, he's evil, and he's just using it for his own personal gain because he can't do it himself. So it's like, that's true evilness. They being nice because they needed something from her. And then once they got it, now when she does the spell with the making the monkeys being able to fly with their wings, and then it's like, oh, well, they need something to, like, you know, uniting people with a common enemy, and then like immediately turning against Elphaba. It's so devastating and heartbreaking. Like, oh gosh. And beforehand too, when first she was like so excited to meet him, and then like, you know, showing like the makeshift Emerald City and like, oh, the yellow brick road, you know, and then like the little mini Elphaba doll, and then like also like the foreshadowing of, oh, I always wanted a son or daughter, you know, Sentimental Man, that whole song. And like the little figurine, and she's like, oh, she's green. He's like, oh, well, she doesn't have to be. Is that your heart's desire? And then she says, no, my heart's desire is for you to help the animals. But then sadly, that's not the case at all, unfortunately. And then again, like immediately Madame Marble saying, oh, do not trust this wicked witch, and like her green skin, it's like, oh, she's evil, like, you know, terrible, so heartbreaking. But then poor Glinda trying to help, and it's like, Elfie, listen, like, just apologize, just say you're sorry, and like, it's, you can still meet the wizard. It's like, you could still, like, you know, not meet the wizard rather, but like, you can still like get everything you want, and then sing, no, I don't want it anymore, you know. Oh my gosh, it's just like, that's it. Like, now something has changed in me, something is not the same, you know. Like, this is truly like, you know, her facing the injustice and knowing that she's gonna have to do this herself, because like when she invites Glinda to go with her, but sadly it's like, you know, that's them saying goodbye. This is like where they're gonna part ways for now, and like going on different paths. And oh my gosh, so then that whole Defying Gravity sequence, I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy now. I like the back and forth with that. It was so good. And God, that song is so good, obviously. Like, oh my gosh, all the songs, obviously. But yeah, this like being the climax of this movie, it's so great. And like her truly becoming the Wicked Witch, and then she puts the, like, Elphie, you're shivering. She puts like the cape on her. That's another truly emotional, beautiful moment. Like when she has tears in her eyes and she just winks at her. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's so beautiful. And then when they're singing together, Defying Gravity, of course. And that's the first time to me hearing them sing that together where it feels like a love song, and not necessarily in a romantic way, although it can be interpreted that way. But I'm like, they're really truly like letting each other go, letting each other like, wanting each other to find happiness. Because also like earlier when they're also like that other song when they're singing Emerald City and we're two good friends, two best friends. Like, because again, that's that true, pure friendship that they give each other, Elphaba and Glinda, And then also, of course, actually at this point, then she's Glinda. Like, it's like in solidarity with Dr. Dillamond, I will now be known henceforth as Glinda the Good. Like, no more Glinda. So that's great too. But with them singing Defying Gravity, like, because first it's like this, I hope you're happy now. And then then it's truly, I hope you're happy in the end. And then, of course, like when she flies off and, the whole unlimited, it's so beautiful. So then, of course, ending with To Be Continued. But, oh, gosh, it's so emotional. It was so beautifully done. I really am so excited for part 2. And in particular, I'm so excited for Good. Like, just that song, because, oh my God, I already know I'm going to be in tears with that. Like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait. Evidently, that was the first song that Cynthia and Ariana sang together. They were over, I believe, Jon M. Chu's house. Then Stephen Schwartz was there, and then he played the piano, and they sang that song together. And I was like, oh, I cannot wait to hear it. It's going to be so emotional and so beautiful. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so such a lovely movie. I can't wait for part 2. It's so beautifully done. Honestly, like, what I feel too with all of the actors, it feels like everyone made a meal out of their roles. Like every moment is so impactful, whether it's comedic, whether it's emotional, whether it's like, darker, whether it's highlighting the friendship, obviously, the themes of, again, like good versus bad, and like kindness versus selfishness, and like, evil versus selfless, like all these like, bigger themes of it. And like, the loneliness, and then like finding true friendship, and like finding your true purpose, and like whether that's like you're doing it on your own, because like even when Elphaba sings, and if I'm flying solo, at least I'm flying free, that whole thing. And that like through their friendship, like obviously in the song For Good, I can't wait for that, oh my gosh, that like they become better having known each other, and like pushing each other to be better, and like becoming their true selves through all that. And like, how they both symbolize goodness and what's most important, because again, Elphaba, above everything else, her kindness and her intelligence are what shines through and make her who she is. Doesn't matter about her green skin, like all this stuff that is really profound and beautiful. And like Glinda too, first being so vapid, but then like learning to think differently and stand on her own in her own way as well. So it's all really great. Oh my gosh, it's all so beautifully done. I can't wait for part 2 again. I just keep saying that because wow, it's great. It's really beautiful, and oh my gosh, so I really love it. And no one mourns the wicked. Oh gosh, I can't wait. So until part 2, until next time. With that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com. And as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.